Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My first time at MozCon, my first time in Seattle as well, so it's great to be here. And today I'm going to talk about something that I'm really passionate about, which is sharing or making data available and useful at scale. It's something that I've been doing a lot over the years, and I'm really excited to talk about it. First of all, I'm going to talk about a little bit about my journey at Google. And then I'll talk about bulk data exports, which is my favorite feature on Search Console. It's amazing. I love it. I'll talk a little bit about how you can do analysis efficiently using bulk data exports. And then I'm going to talk about what's next. For me, maybe you can infer for Search Console. I'm not going to do any big announcements, so no expectations. So I started my career at Google 10 years ago. It's a long time, it's a lifetime. And I joined the Google Analytics engineering team. I spent many years there. And my job was to help digital marketers make better decisions using data. So just sharing best practices when it comes to analyzing data. And presentations, articles. I wrote a book on Google Analytics. And with the years, we started working on a really amazing product. I love it. We called it Date Studio back then. Now it's called the Looker Studio. And just my job changed a little bit to sharing best practices when it comes to data visualization. So how do you build dashboards to monitor your performance? How do you do analysis? How do you use data visualization to understand and optimize your online behavior for users going to your websites? And then about 4 years ago, I joined the search engineering team. I work under John Miller, great guy, best manager ever. He has more answers than I have questions, which is really nice. So my job at Search, my job at Search is well, let's talk about two things. One is product and one is education. So on the product side, I try to understand what people want, what you want, what the community wants from Search Console. What do you need to make your job or to do your job better? And I've been working on with the product team to build features for that. One of them was the URL inspection API that I led, and the second one is the bulk data exports. So everything related to data, and that's why my focus is on Search Console, and I sit on Tel Aviv, where all the Search Console team is based. And the second thing is education. So on one hand, I bring feedback from outside, and I try to improve our tools. And on the other hand, I try to externalize things that we're working on and how our systems work. So I do that through writing articles on the search blog. I do presentations at events. It's great. And I also have a YouTube series, Search Console Training. And I started lately doing events throughout the world called Search Central Lives, something that we've been doing a lot, the Search Relations team. So basically bringing events to places where there are no events or there are very few events, and we build those events with the local communities and try to share best practices when it comes to search. So bulk data export is a feature that I absolutely adore. I feel like crying every time I talk about it. I've been involved from the beginning. And if for no other reason, just because I became a really good friend with this guy, 𝗙cie𝗹𝗹cie. He's a senior software engineer in the Search Console team. And that happened 2.5 years ago. We were mid-COVID, and we're not going to the office, and I wanted to share more data, more Search Console data. I thought that we need to share more. We're not sharing enough. And I reached out to Gal. He's an engineer on the backend team. And I said, Gal, can we have a VC? Again, we're not going to the office. We jump into a VC, and I start talking to him, small talk, so where are you based? And he's like, no, in Tel Aviv as well. And it happens that he was 2 blocks from my house. And okay, let's go for a coffee. And we sit in this bench in the heart of Tel Aviv. We're having a coffee, and I share with him, I said, look, Gal, can we share more data? with the world. I was thinking maybe we can improve the Data Studio connector. Maybe it's going to be really nice. People will have more access. They'll be able to make better decisions. And it's like, no, that's not a good idea. And he explained me why. And I was like, OK, that's not a good idea. So we're not going to expand the Data Studio connector. And then he shares with me some of his ideas. He was thinking about Google Takeout. I don't know who knows Google Takeout, but Google Takeout, I won't go into it, but it's not a good idea because, well, it's CSV files and it's for one-time exports. So Search Console, we needed something that is automated throughout, like every day. And I said, well, maybe we can do BigQuery. And he was like, wow, BigQuery, let's do it. That's amazing. We can do it. We can share all of the data. I'm like, seriously? And he said, we can share everything. I'm like, OK, that's great. Let's do it. And he was super excited. I was super excited. And I spoke with my manager. He spoke with his manager. And we were like, OK, we're going to take some time to build at least a proposal. And I'm going to share some of the, it's kind of the life of a feature, right? So how do you develop a feature on Search Console, in Google in general? And the first thing is this, so can we do it? So I sat down, I thought about like product specifications, how can I make this thing happen? And he thought, well, is it feasible? Can we do it from an engineering perspective? And we were both like working on a 2-pager, trying to convince like our managers and going up a little bit, try to convince their managers that it's a great idea. And so that's the first thing. Now, once we know that we can do it, should we do it? That's a question that we were asked, right? So you're proposing to share like orders of magnitude more data than you're sharing today. Why do you want to do it? How is it going to help Google? How is it going to help the users? Why should we do it? And we needed this because we have to convince them that we need engineers to work on this product. And we need some kind of internal buy-in. We need some kind of approval to start working on something that we're going to share so much more data. And we talked to a lot of people. And in this case, it's also like there is people from cloud involved. Even though it's not a cloud feature, like we're just dumping the data into Google Cloud, BigQuery. But still, there's more people involved in the process. It's a bit complex. Third thing, let's do it. OK, we convinced the people that we needed to convince, at least to get the resources that we need to work on that. Let's do it. So we start building the product, and we start, so the engineers, they start like building the thing. First, we have like a manual export, then we have a semi-automated export. I'm working on the product requirements document, like making sure that we have some like a feature. And throughout that, we're also testing the exports with, so we had an alpha group, so that we worked with them very early on to get their feedback on, is it a good solution for you? Like, how would you use it? And we want to understand how would people use it so that we can build the feature for the users, right? So for you to use the product. And so we're testing it externally, we're testing it internally, like trying to do analysis, trying to look at the data. And last one of all, like done, right? Let's launch it. And we worked quite a lot on documentation. You'll see, I'll have a link later. But it's something that we really wanted to make right because it's a complex product. It's not easy. But so we worked on that. We did some final tweaks, thinking about like with more feedback, external feedback. And last the launch, we had a pretty big plan. We were thinking about maybe doing a phased launch because, well, suddenly we're going to open up this thing where like the biggest websites on the web, if everyone sign up at the same time, it's like a lot of data, it's a lot of pipelines, and like can we do it? Like, and we were not sure, but we made the executive decision to try it, and it worked. So that was the launch, and there was like a lot of, so we wrote like 4 or 5 articles and videos and the whole launch process. So that's how we worked. And just in terms of what is dump data exports? Sorry, bulk data exports. Okay. So first of all, you set it up on the Search Console. So you go to Search Console, you give us like your cloud project ID, you give us your dataset name. It's a very simple process. From that day on, we export the data every day into your BigQuery account, right? So every day we get this. I'm going to talk about the data. We dump it into your BigQuery. The dump is all of search, discover, and news, which is a lot of data all in the same place. It's something that people have been asking a lot. We want everything in the same thing, right? In the same data table. And no data row limit, and I'm going to take a second to explain this. There are two limitations on Search Console data. The first one is privacy filtering. The second one is data row limits. So what happens? We have a source of data, right? The light. So there is somewhere where we're pulling data from. Now, of course, there are like many levels of data processing, like from the moment that someone is searching something until the moment that we pull the data into Search Console, right? There is like a lot of processes and pipelines and everything happening. Now, we pull the data from one specific place, which has like all the data that we need. Now, what we have been doing until now is we pull the data, we process it, we aggregate it, and then we move it into the Search Console backend. That's how we did it until now. The Google Search Console backend has a limitation, which is what we call data row limits. It's 50,000 rows. When we pull the data, we aggregate everything up to 50,000, and then we put on the backend. So that's the data row limit. The data filtering, the privacy filtering happens before we pull the data. So that's not data that we have access to. Like, we don't even see the data that is privacy filtered. So that's not going to change. So that's something that happens way before we touch the data. So that's one thing. What we did here is to remove the data row limits. So when we pull the data, instead of sending it through to the backend, before we do any aggregation, anything on the data, we dump it into your BigQuery account, and then we bring it into the backend. Right? So that's how it works, and that's what we're doing here. With bulk data exports, we are removing that row limit. So as many queries, for example, or URLs that you have, we're going to give it to you, all your performance data. Now, so that's the no backfilling. That's something that I've been hearing a lot. People ask me all the time. There is no backfilling. So the reason is that when we pull the data, this source, they don't keep the data. So we cannot go and backfill the data. So we can only pull the data and do it from the day that you set it up, right? And the reason that you can do that on the API is that, well, that's the data that we have on our backend. So we keep it for 16 months, and you can pull from the API for that timeline, but you cannot do it with bulk data exports. And the last thing is that you can retry for a few days. So for example, you start the export, and then you have, let's say, quota exceeded, or we don't have permissions to dump the data. Then we're going to keep trying for a few days. If you don't fix it, we're going to send emails. And if you don't fix it, we'll stop it, and you'll lose data. So that's more or less what this feature is. I'm going to talk about the data itself. First of all, there are 3 tables. So the first table is the site impression. And site impression is aggregated by site. So you'll see all the queries that generate impressions and clicks to your site. And you're going to see them. You can segment it by country, by search type, by device, and then you'll see impressions, clicks, and position. And you'll see the anonymized query. So that's also something that people have been asking from us a lot, which is, can we get the data for anonymized queries as well? So here it is. That's the data for anonymized queries. So you'll see if there was a query that was anonymized in different countries, in different devices, different search types, you'll also get a row for those queries. So you get more detailed data when it comes to anonymized queries as well. The second thing is URL impression. That's the second table. And URL impression, it's a way more detailed table. And basically, it gives you all the URLs in your website that get any impression on a Google search. And for each URL, you'll see the queries that are generating traffic. And for each of those, for each pair, you'll see the country, the device, the search type, but also you'll see if there are any rich results driving traffic. Rich results, they are Boolean traffic, right? So either you have FAQ or you don't have FAQ result, or product result, or whatever. So you'll see the data segmented, so it's a pretty big table. And you'll see, of course, clicks, impressions, and position. And let's just calling your attention to this again. That's the anonymized queries. So we have two fields, one for anonymized queries and one for anonymized URLs. Anonymized URLs for Discover, right? So on Discover, if you get traffic to Discover, but it's below a certain threshold, the number of people that click on that link, then you'll see that as an anonymized URL. And the last table is an export log. So every day when we successfully dump the data, we're going to add a row saying, well, we successfully dumped the data. Of course, if we cannot dump the data, we cannot update this table. So you'll just see like a missing row here. So that's the data. And one of the things that very early on we were a bit worried is that people will, especially as I worked with a backend engineer, like his first worry is like, what if people just link the raw data to their dashboards, right? It's something that I saw a lot of people saying, well, I can link my BigQuery data straight with Looker Studio, and that's great. But that's like a massive problem, because if you do that, do not do that, it's very problematic because, well, there is a reason that we aggregate the data when we put it on our backend. It's because it can become very expensive very quickly. So if you link straight to BigQuery, it means that every time that someone sees your dashboard on Looker Studio, there is a request to BigQuery, and you're paying for that, right? So it can become very expensive. So don't do that. And I'm going to give you a few tips on how to be efficient or how not to waste money on Google Cloud. So first of all, there are two things that you need to do. First is plan. Okay, so plan your data pools so that you avoid surprises at the end of the month, right? With your bill, with your Google Cloud bill. So how do you avoid surprises? And second one is how do you optimize? How can you be smart about pooling your data? And I know that for some of you, it might be a bit like it's a very data engineering driven thing, but those tips, I think they're very simple and keep them in mind when you're using the export data. So first of all, limit data storage. Now, we keep the data for 16 months. Now you can keep it forever if you want. But that has a cost. If you keep it forever, if you keep it for 24, 48, right, it becomes expensive. At some point, it's going to be expensive. If you have a large website, if you have a small website, it's not going to become expensive. But if you have a large website, you can limit it by creating an expiration date to your partitions. This is very important. So if you're on your phones, listen just to this, okay? Do not limit. Do not set an expiration to the table. Set an expiration to the partition. What does it mean? If you set an expiration date of, let's say, 48 months to your table, it means that after 48 months, everything is going to get dropped. You're going to lose everything, all the table. Now, the partition, if you set an expiration to the partition, and this is, I didn't say before, but this is a date partitioned table, which means for every day you have a partition, which is a date. Now, if you set an expiration to the partition, after 48 months, this partition, this specific date, is going to be dropped, right? And every month, we drop one. So that's what you want. You want to set an expiration to the partition to limit data storage. Second thing, you can pre-aggregate data for analysis. Again, that's what we do in our backend. We pre-aggregate. What does it mean? Let's say you have a dashboard just for US traffic, okay? If you link it to the raw table, what will it do? Like every day, when you update the dashboard, it's going to go through the entire table and pull the US, right? And that's expensive. What you want to do is every day, you want to materialize a table just for the US that will serve this dashboard, just for the US, right? We have tables for different reports on Search Console. Every time you go to a specific report, we query the entire table, it's going to be very expensive and very slow. For you too, same thing. So there is here, you can see this image, it's the Power BI, sorry, wow, that was a bad mistake. Sorry. BI engine. Okay, Power BI is another company. We don't, yeah, don't. Well, the BI engine is a product, it's a feature on Google Cloud that basically pre-aggregates the data for you. So it's a very easy, like built-in solution that you can use, and it does this kind of stuff, like it saves a cache on the data. So it's really, you can try that one, and that's an interesting BI engine. The third thing that I wanted to say is billing alerts and restrictions. Well, go to BigQuery when you start using this thing and think about how much money you're willing to use on your like for this, right? Let's say $50,000, $10,000, okay? And set a budget. You cannot go over it, okay? That's very important. Set a budget on BigQuery. And it's very simple. Now, in addition to that, you can also set alerts. So alert me when I spent $1,000, $5,000, and then $10,000, right? So that you don't get surprised when you get the bill. And one small thing that if you want to be really smart, you can set a limit also to if someone writes a very stupid query to pull the data that costs you like $2,000. Like people can do that. They can just select everything and give me everything. Right? People do that. Now, you can set a price, like a budget, for queries on the data. Like if someone writes a stupid query, it's not going to run because it's too expensive. So that's also something that you might want to check out. Second thing, sample the data. Sorry. So that was the planning. Now, in terms of optimizing, there are a few things that I'd like to talk about. First of all, limit the input scan. What does it mean? So again, about stupid like data pools, select star. Never use select star. Okay, I know a lot of people do that. I do that sometimes. I did that, I don't do that anymore. But select star just goes through the entire table and brings you everything. And it can be really expensive. So, and some people think that if you do select star, limit to 100, it's going to solve the issue because you're just going to get 100 results. But no, it doesn't. Because when you do select star, it looks at everything and brings back 100. So that doesn't save you cost. You'll still pay for everything. So do that. Do not use select star. What you can do here, two examples. The first one is where data date between, and then you get, well, give me just the last 14 days of data, right? That, or the last 28, or the last, whatever, 360, right? You can do that. That's good practice. And the last thing here, where query is different from null. Let's say you're doing a query analysis of Search Console. You can just, before you start the analysis, you drop everything where the query is null. So that you don't get that, you don't pay for that, right? So that's very important. So to remove all the data that you don't need before you start the analysis. Sample the data. So they're like built-in functions for you to create a sample, right? Who looks at 100% of the data? Like you should never, not never, you should look only sometimes when you're doing like a massive thing, look at like 100% of the data. But like sampling is a very important and basic technique when it comes to analyzing data. You can look at 50% of your data when you're doing most of the analysis. And it's a built-in function. You just use a sample table, sample system, okay? And the last one, use approximate functions. Again, if you're doing a quick and dirty analysis, just like you don't need the exact number right? You don't need to run through the entire world and get you the exact number. You can do approximate functions. So those are a few tips. And just to go through, like, it's very important, if you're using this, like, it can become expensive. Don't waste your money. Plan so that you avoid surprises in the end of the month. And also optimize when you're pulling the data so that you don't, like, be smart about pulling your data. Or just consult with a data engineer. It's also an option. Now, last thing, what's next? First of all, for me, that's next week I'm going to visit my parents in Brazil. So that's a waterfall that is just like 1 hour away from my parents that I used to go as a kid. And every time that I go there, I try to. Anyway, that's what's next for me, next week, literally. For Search Console, or for me and Search Console, so I said in the beginning, like, my mission at Google has been to make, well, now it's to make search data available and useful at scale. That's what I'm trying to do. And I'm going to talk about these 3 things that I underlined. First of all, and talk about maybe, well, I'm going to focus my time over the next year or so. So first of all, search data. I like to say, so search data is 2 things. So one of them is Search Console that I've been talking about. So if you're verified owner of the website, we'll give you all the data for your website. Right, but there is another data set which is amazing, and I hope very much that everyone here uses it, which is Google Trends. Google Trends is, well, it's a Google data, anonymous aggregate. So there's like a lot of data. It would be awesome to have more things on Google Trends. And they also, like, they sit on our floor. We're under the same, like, umbrella. It's nice. We talk, like, and I'm always like, dude, work on it. Anyway, so Search Console, Google Trends. I think those are 2 very important things that I'm going to keep on focusing. Well, making data available, and that's what I've been talking about. So URL inspection API, bulk data export. I know that there is always, like, more data to export, but I think that at this point we're like, okay, we have this bulk export. Let's see what people do with it. We're checking closely what you're doing with it, like listening through the social media channels and stuff. So that's something that also we're always thinking about ways to make more data available and useful, and I think that's the focus here now for the coming time. How do we make this data useful at scale from a product perspective, from just in general? Like, we have a lot of data now on a data warehouse, right? BigQuery, that you can do a ton of stuff, and I'm working on that specifically, and I really want to make sure that you can use this data to make an impact on your businesses and to succeed on search. And before I leave you, one thing, so I mentioned Search Console Training is my series on YouTube. So check that out. Here's a link to the Help Center, actually, where this video, the first video of bulk data exports, I have 2 videos on the subject. If you want to get started, it's a great place, goo.gle/bulk data. And with that, thank you very much.